Conventional wisdom states that when you lift weights, therefore putting on muscle, that increases your metabolism. That's just common sense, right? Turns out there's a little nuance to that statement. Yes, while technically true, the actual increase isn't as much as what's being promoted out there. And all the credit goes to the amazing work of Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She practices what's called a muscle-centric medicine approach. I learned it from her that muscle doesn't increase metabolism as much as we thought. For starters, everyone's metabolism is different. You actually have your own unique metabolic fingerprint, like no one else has it. And when it comes to resting metabolism, skeletal muscle is actually only responsible for 20% of that process. In short, not much. For context, you could put on 10 kilos of muscle, which is a lot of muscle. That's 22 pounds. You'll only increase your total caloric expenditure by maybe 60 calories a day at rest. Like I said, it does increase it, but not by much. And that's with 22 pounds of muscle. Do you know how hard it is to even put on a pound of muscle? And I'm talking about lean muscle mass here. Like for example, a lot of people will claim that they put on 5 pounds of muscle over the summer, when in reality, they actually put on 4 pounds of fat and maybe a pound of muscle. The real magic when it comes to muscle starts to shine when you train, when you start doing physical activity. Because now we can start factoring in the percentage of calories you burn in terms of nutrient partitioning, as well as all the beneficial metabolic effects that it triggers throughout your body. There's also that crossover effect that happens when it comes to improving your physical health and mental health. That's where the real magic of muscle comes in. It really is through physical activity. The mood elevation and energy boost alone is worth the price of admission, in my opinion. Like, you'll always feel better after moving your body. And I have said this a million times, but not all exercise are created equal. Resistance training trumps all exercise in this regard because it's anabolic. You are sending the strongest signal to your body when you do resistance training to build and maintain muscle. That's what anabolic means. Now, let's quickly talk about some of these beneficial metabolic effects. Right near the top of that list is the fact that muscle is the largest site for glucose disposal. When you think about diabetes or even pre-diabetes, muscle is the best way to clear up the glucose circulating in your system. Think of it as a sink for glucose. The more muscle you have, the greater the capacity you have when it comes to utilizing carbs. That's why you want to focus on correcting metabolic composition first, which is why I have such a big problem with this fat acceptance movement. Don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning fat shaming. I get it. I used to get bullied as a kid. But we should not be convincing people that there's health at every size. Like, no. Fun fact, I actually got fat shamed into working out when I was a teenager. But I used that negative energy to fuel my fire. I didn't want to become a victim of my circumstance. I did something about it. Now, if we go another level, again, this is where the real magic of muscle comes into play. Muscle is actually an endocrine organ. And this is relatively new science. That's why nobody's talking about it. Because skeletal muscle, when it contracts from exercise, it releases myokines. Myokines, in case you're wondering, are proteins that travel throughout the body. They're like little messengers. And it affects the brain, the bones, it's anti-inflammatory. It even affects how we utilize nutrients. Interleukin-6, for example, when it's released by muscle, is exactly that. It's anti-inflammatory and it helps with nutrient partitioning. Exercise also spurs the production of BDNF, which helps with memory. Like, it's often touted as miracle grow for the brain. And I've heard many experts argue that you actually want to exercise for the brain. And I wholeheartedly agree. Like, Alzheimer's, for example, is now often considered type 3 diabetes. It's insulin resistance in the brain. Other benefits of training that most people don't even think about is improved coordination, mobility, and balance. You're strengthening your muscles, your bones, and you're more flexible, which in turn makes you a more functional human being, able to do all sorts of cool things. This is how you can age gracefully. Mark Sisson, one of my favorite authors, is my favorite example of this. He's 68 years old and he looks like that. Like, how many 68-year-olds do you know that can do stand-up paddleboarding? Do you think he's thinking about a retirement home right now? Probably not. And the other pervasive myth about muscle, and you mostly see this with women, but it definitely applies to men as well. They don't want to lift weights because they don't want to get bulky. If you want some context, I have been lifting weights since I was a teenager. I was also a national level weightlifter for a few years, meaning I used to compete in a sport where the goal was to lift as much weight as possible overhead. I'd like to think that I'm on the side where I'm pushing the boundaries of my full genetic potential, competing in a sport where it was my job to be as physically strong as humanly possible. And I look like this. So again, it's very hard to put on muscle. Feel free to lift more than 5 pounds at the gym. Unfortunately, that myth is still as pervasive as ever. That's why you still see a lot of people purely do cardio, or they do cardio-based group fitness classes and these other poo-poo fluffy workouts. Yes, I just said poo-poo fluffy. The unintended consequence of that is they look the same over a lifetime. These are the same people you see at the gym sweating their hearts out, but they make zero gains. Oftentimes, these are also the same people that count calories burned from exercise, which literally means nothing. Because the human body is really smart. And as you burn more calories, you also eat more calories. In fact, oftentimes these cardio enthusiasts start trending the wrong way and they start to lose muscle. Imagine that. Because just doing cardio, especially chronic cardio patterns, is catabolic. Catabolic means to break down. That's how people start rocking that skinny fat look. Don't believe me? Just look at the starting line of any marathon. The obesity rate is around 30%. No different than the global average. Like, what? These well-meaning people presumably train hundreds of hours for a 42-kilometer race. So if calories burned from exercise counted, these marathoners should have 0% body fat. Instead, the people that actually move the needle in the right direction are the ones that create a situation where their body is required to grow. And again, that comes from resistance training. And of course, volume and effort is key for this to work. Unfortunately, the people that are in the middle, I'm talking about people that are in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s. For that age group, anabolic resistance starts to become a problem. Especially if you don't know what you're doing or you're following the wrong information. Like, I don't know, eating less red meat, which is the single worst piece of advice you could ever give to someone, especially for that age group. Because when you're younger, you're largely driven by hormones. That's why you've got teenagers and people in their 20s eating whatever they want and treating their bodies like an absolute dumpster fire, and they're fine. Like, you could have shot me in my early 20s and I still probably would have showed up to work the next day. But again, when you get to your mid-30s, your body starts to change. And if you don't know what you're doing to overcome this anabolic resistance, and you just keep dieting, maybe you start listening to the media and you eat less meat because of this push to go plant-based, which is based on garbage data. And I've exposed that lie many times in my other videos. You start depriving your body of high-quality protein from animals and animal products which it desperately needs to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Maybe you're not lifting weights because you're scared of getting bulky. Maybe you're doing the wrong types of exercise. It quickly becomes a slippery slope. That's why I specialize my coaching program for that age group, because I know how devastating it could be when you get to your 70s and 80s if you don't start now. And I've seen this with my own relatives. It is soul crushing. Maybe you've seen it with your own family. When they don't have enough muscle, that aging process becomes brutal. Like, you could argue until the cows come home what the best diet is in your 20s. Again, you can get away with a lot. But again, as you age, when you get to your mid-30s, 40s, 50s, you better know what you're doing. And if you want to work with me, you can check out the link somewhere at the top here or in the description below. But again, just think about Mark Sisson aging gracefully. Instead of being immobile and frail, the choice becomes easy. The good thing is you don't need to spend an ungodly amount of time training to get results. Like these days, I spend a grand total of 60 minutes per week when it comes to resistance training. That's it. That's really all you need. But again, you have to know what you're doing for this to work. Long story short, you want to build and maintain muscle for all the reasons I mentioned in this video. I'd argue that the mental health benefits alone is worth the effort. And again, you do that through resistance training and getting a bolus amount of high quality protein per meal from animals and animal products. You're actually eating protein for the essential amino acids, specifically leucine. You need 2.6 grams of leucine, which is around 30 grams of animal protein, to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Like, those are hard and fast scientific numbers. Like, either MPS happens or it doesn't. Just like either you're pregnant or you're not. There's no arguing there. If we're talking about animal protein, that's about 5 ounces of cooked meat or 6 ounces of fish. Like, if you want to equate those essential amino acids in plant protein, you would have to eat 6 cups of quinoa to get that minimum of 2.6 grams of leucine, which would just be devastating to your metabolic health. That's why not all protein are created equal. So yes, muscle does increase your metabolism, but not as much as you think. But you should definitely still train for all the other benefits I mentioned in this video. Resistance training is a mental health tool. It's also a mood, energy, and sleep booster. It also makes you a more functional human being, able to do all sorts of cool things. Hey guys, if you enjoyed that video and you want to keep doing a deep dive because there's so much more to learn, then you're gonna love this one. We're just getting warmed up. All right, I'll see you there.